Ready? How exciting. I'm so glad that you guys are here. So you are going to be joining me to find out what on earth we all want, aside from toilet paper and chopped tomatoes. So where is everybody? So I'm in London, the panelists are in London, but if you just write in the little Q&A box, I should be able to see. Hi, Shazia. I hope I'm saying that right. Yeah, so we've got London, Sue Campbell in London, Eugene in London, Cyprus.
Cyprus, exciting.
Oh my God, imagine being in Cyprus right now. You could have a tan, you could be eating amazing food. They probably have toilet paper. But most people are from London. Awesome. Oh, hi, David. So wonderful to see familiar faces here. So what we're going to be talking about, or rather what Robert and Oksana are going to be talking about, is what consumers want now, what they think they'll want in the future, but also how brands can respond to that, because this is such an important time, and it's a very sensitive time. So you can get things really wrong, but also you can get things really right. So for those of you who have not yet had the pleasure of going to any events with Oksana or with Robert, then poor you, but we're changing that today. I'll tell you a little bit about Robert. Robert has spent 30 years in the advertising industry, being one of the head honchos. So he was the worldwide CEO of Saatchi, one of the world's largest advertising agencies. And you guys might remember that really cool advert with the gorilla banging the drums for Cadbury's. That was his team at a company that he co-founded called Fallon. Robert is now a partner at a venture firm called Red Rice Ventures, and they are investing in consumer companies at the early stage. And they are investing in this climate, which I think is really super exciting. And Oksana is an early stage venture investor as well, and has invested in a lot of retail technology companies and understands the consumer sector really, really well. And she's previously worked at Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and has done quite a lot of investing, and generally somebody I love to learn from. So without further ado, please tell us, what do we want? Oh, sorry, one more thing. Guys, before everything, you'll see a little Q&A box at the bottom. So just write your questions there, and then we will deal with them. Shazia, yes, the slides are tiny right now. That's because the screen is not being shared, but Oksana is about to share it.
Actually, I am already sharing the screen,
oh,
so it should be. Is everybody experiencing issues with the screen share?
Is this better? Yeah, just double click on it and okay. Yeah, so basically what you need to do, guys, if the screen sharing is difficult for you, then just double click on it. Everyone all right? Cool. Right. Let's get started.
Okay. Well, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. How weird is this? I mean, I know webinars have been around for a while, but this is just like weird. Monday afternoon meeting. But here we are. I'm delighted you've all chosen to join us, and maybe we can shed some light on what is just extraordinary, what's going on. I started with this little quote here just because I think it's a good reminder of the importance of leadership, and because it's a good reminder that loose lips sink ships, as they say, or put another way, it's brand behaviour that can make such a difference to the winners and the losers. So you can draw your own conclusions from that. I'm not trying to make any political point other than to say what leaders say and do right now is more important than ever. Anyway, so context needs, even if you, I don't think you need any context, but Oksana, if you could click on. There's obviously, we're in the middle of this blimmin' pandemic, and the reality is that that pandemics, epidemics, and spread of infectious disease globally have been an ever-present part of human history, and I've just plucked out 4 by way of example. The Spanish flu is kind of interesting because it kind of gets lost in the history books, certainly in the Western world. So I always think of the World War I as being the defining moment that led to the Roaring Twenties. Actually, the World War I, there were 22 million deaths of World War I. There were 50 million deaths of the Spanish flu, 50, just to put it into context. The other one that I think is interesting is this H2N2, this influenza. That was in 1957 and 1958. Now that killed over 1 million people lost their lives to this infection in 1958, and that was 14,000 in Britain. So quite impactful, and it was interesting. If you look at the press at the time, it was the same arguments. There was a lot of heat about is the national health going to be overwhelmed, and what can we do about that? And secondly, there was kind of a storm around the lack of vaccine, or it took too long to get to a vaccine, etc., as well as discussions about whether it was more important to protect the economy or save lives. Anyway, the point being, I guess, that you get these pandemics, and quite often a euphoria follows. So you have the swinging 60s, you have the roaring 20s, and it's sort of preparing for what happens next is interesting. And you'll all have read that there's definitely two schools of thought. One is total Armageddon, dystopian, this is the apocalypse. And the other is, actually, it's going to be very, very interesting world when we all kind of come out of it in whatever shape or form. I happen to be of the latter, but there you go. So just a question is, how do brands respond? How do leaders respond to this situation? And I've been spending an awful lot of time with a number of clients and companies of all different types, looking at and helping them with their approach to this. And the ones that are, without question, the most impressive are the ones that put structure and strategy to the approach, rather than just sort of knee-jerk or what feels right day to day. They actually structure it. And the working thesis of all of them, which is kind of obvious, I know, but the working thesis is that business as usual will never be as it was. It will be utterly redefined. And the Harvard Business Review just published a piece yesterday that said, I like this quote, I'm going to read it out: post-virus norm will be different, just like going to the airport was different post 9/11. And I thought that was quite a thoughtful observation, that we have undergone massive changes in behaviours and we've kind of got on with it. The other observation, the working thesis of the companies I'm working with, is that all of them, because of that fact about the new norm won't be the norm as we know it, that all the brands are in one way or another applying what Adam Morgan and Eat Big Fish would refer to as a challenger brand mentality, and largely challenging themselves as much as challenging their marketplace. So it's creating quite a lot of interesting and innovative thinking. As you can see on this chart, a very simplistic chart, the best response I've seen is breaks the company's response approach into 3 chapters, if you like, 3 phases. The first is react. I'm reacting to something that's happening. And it's about survival, it's about the day-to-day, and it's the stuff that happens almost immediately. And I think we're sort of coming out of that phase. But that reaction is about offering empathy and offering help. And in challenger brand thinking, that's offering up brilliant basics. That's what they call it. And that means you're not reinventing the wheel or anything. You're just, the stuff that you do day to day, you just do it brilliantly and keep it simple. And quite often in this react phase, it's more often about comms, communications, than about actions. So it's empathetic emails. Is everything all right? How's the family? It's all that good stuff. But that's the first phase. The second phase is respond. And that's about, okay, now this is kind of a changed reality now. We're in week 3, whatever week we're in, feels like week 30 of isolation. But here we all are, and we're kind of getting used to it. We're kind of here, you know, we're on Zoom, and and this is our reality, so we're getting on with it. And this is the point at which brands in the respond phase should be engaging and enabling. And that's about, again, in challenger brand speaking, offering up compelling differences. So that could be, don't have to be big things, but they're like, we are now behaving very differently to the way we were before. And a simple example down my high street is a yoga studio, which now offers classes online. Loads of that stuff going on, but it's a perfectly good example. And then the third phase, and the third phase is about preparing for whatever the new norm is, once we can all go to the pub and have meetings in the same room, if we ever can, is thriving in the new normal. It's about adapting behaviors, and the brand's role there is to inspire and innovate. So that's where you kind of go, right, what paradigm shift, if you like, should we be introducing to this new normal? And an example I'd cite there, from if I was talking to a global bank, would be, should this bank be the first ever cashless global bank, given that no one wants to touch money and there's the rest of it, as an example. What's interesting about respond and rebuild is that they both tend to be action orientated rather than comms. They're actually, what can brands do rather than what can brands say? And I think there's an awful lot of brands out there that are maybe confusing the distinction. I mean, I've spent 30 years in communications. I love communications, but there's a place for it, and there's a place for actions, and there's a place for both. So those are three responses, and I guess when we look at then how brands behave, this is where it gets very nuanced. And this chart is brutally simple, but I'll try and bring some nuance to it. As you all will know, as well as I do, the branding itself it's a reflection of the sum total of every organizational action. Everything communicates, and that's set against the backdrop of culture. And when you put it all together, it reveals who you really are. Who are you? What's the true character of a company? And there's been some wonderful, beautiful examples of brands stepping up and leaders stepping up. And there's been just a few really unedifying examples. Just to give you a little example, the top one there is Adidas versus Nike. So we all know in this world, as consumers and as brand owners, as entrepreneurs, as people who operate in this world, that goodwill takes ages to establish goodwill, and you can lose it in a heartbeat. Absolutely in a heartbeat. And I think that the Adidas CEO, Kasper Rorsted, may have discovered that. On the 16th of March, he sent an email to all staff, all frontline staff, saying the following. On the 16th of March, that wasn't that long ago. We have to keep the company going and open for business to ensure we can pay our bills and salaries to everyone. Okay. The very next day, that decision was reversed, and all stores were closed. Everyone closed, and the next day after that, they put out an ad online that said, and I quote, "Branding is ultimately not what you say, but who you choose to be. Choose wisely." Which is perfectly nice writing, had they not played their hand already and showed who they really were. If they're prepared to put their frontline staff in the stores at harm's way in order for money, that kind of tells you where the priorities are. By contrast, Nike on March the 15th, so a day before the Adidas CEO's email, they took the decision to close all stores everywhere, and on the same day informed all their frontline staff that employees that they would be paid. It was 6 days after that they put out a piece of advertising, which you've probably seen, which has done the rounds online, and rightly so. And it reads, "If you ever dreamed of playing for millions around the world, now's your chance. Play inside. Play for the world." So Nike was walking its talk. Nike was true to who they are. They're utterly consistent. Adidas, yeah, nice intentions or not, but they got caught out. Tottenham Hotspur I put up there, and they've now been joined by Liverpool and half the Premiership clubs. But they had a shocker on the 1st of April, which I thought was an April Fool's actually when I saw it, which was they published their financial report. And in the financial report, I believe they're very proud to announce that they were now the most profitable Premiership club in the country. But in it, they also noted that they would continue to pay their playing staff full whack, and that they were that all non-playing staff were to be furloughed. So you think about that dynamic and what really is being communicated in that moment of chest beating, in that moment in time. It was not a good moment for the club or the brand, and now Liverpool have followed suit. Now there are loads more examples. What I want to share with you now are 6 principles that I believe are highly relevant in where we are right now. And the first one, and it kind of plays to both examples actually, is simply tone deaf. Don't be tone deaf. You know, the tone of what you say is as important as the content of what you're saying. In today's world, because the reader, you, me, everyone, we're heightened. We're heightened with anxiety. We either admit it or we don't. The level of uncertainty we're living in now, as consumers, we are really, really brittle emotionally. More so than we would normally be, let's put it that way. And therefore, any brand's communication needs to be incredibly careful on tone. And any brand that is tone deaf is going to get stuffed. Brewdog's a good example. They did quite a good initiative to turning one of their factories into sanitizing gel, but they then ran a massive ad campaign that was just so inappropriate tonally about it, because it was all playful and fun and perky, and it's had the most awful backlash for that. Airbnb is another one. I booked an Airbnb for a trip to Spain over Easter, and we cancelled it the day before Spain went on national lockdown. And when we contacted Airbnb, they said, well, you know, no proof that when you cancelled it that it was inappropriate. And we're like, nah, you're kidding me, right? Here are all the countries that had lockdown. Here are all the airlines that cancelled. Here's the climate of the moment. And you as a brand that sort of positions yourself as some postmodernist sort of community-based brand, and you sit, and I literally wrote to them and said, you might want to reread your email. Are you sure about that? and they absolutely, they said, we can't make any decision based on hearsay. So what? Which bit of the global crisis are you thinking is hearsay? And what they meant was you can't prove that your flight was cancelled or the country was locked down. Anyway, needless to say, eventually they relented, but it didn't bring out the best in me to get it done. I thought they were tone deaf. That's the first principle. Second principle is just swim lanes. Everyone has a swim lane. Stay in your swim lane. An example there is there's a global bank I was talking to, and their Asian marketing group came back to the centre and said, we want to run a series of ads telling people to wash their hands. And you're like, you're a bank. No. Stick to your knitting. Help people with their debt, on their mortgages, on their municipal business loans. Don't tell them to wash their hands. That's just so inappropriate. And there's so many great examples, just to be positive for a minute, so many great examples of brands that are doing precisely that. So the National Theatre, some of you might have seen, Two Governors, One Landlord, whether the James Corden play, unbelievable. And they're doing a number of free screenings as MoMA, Guggenheim and Louvre are also doing virtual tours, which I think is terrific. Armani converted its Italian factories to producing single-use medical overalls and LVMH, and so it goes on. But the people who stuck to what they do that. If you want to help, do that bit. I think that was very good. So tone deaf, number one. Swim lanes, number two. The third is really simply just avoid naked opportunism. Don't put your prices up just because you can. You will get punished later, I believe. I think right now is not the time to take the piss, if I can put it like that. Number four, remain true to your purpose. Every company, every brand ultimately has a purpose. Some are more purpose-driven than others, but fundamentally, everyone has an essence. And it's similar to the swim lanes, but this is more about what you stand for as much as what you do. The Nike was an example I've already cited. There's a wonderful example. I just love this. You may have seen it. There's a poster out on probably only one poster, out in the streets, I think in London. And it's for The Economist, and it's on the streets, so it's outside. And it says, if you're reading this poster, you don't read The Economist. Meaning, if you're outside when you should be inside, you're not that smart. And we only have smart readers. So I just thought that was fantastic because it was so true. It was their way of saying, wash your hands. It was their way of saying, please comply with the instructions. They did it through their lens, true to who they are and what they believe in. I think that was pretty magnificent. So tone deaf, swim lanes, avoid opportunism, remain true to your purpose. The fifth one is listen harder than ever before. Because day by day, the mood changes and what people are saying about your brand, if you're not getting your brilliant basics done as the challenge of branding, if you're letting people down on the simple stuff, what normally might have been one tweet could be 100,000 today. It's kind of, it's a good time to be listening incredibly hard and be very careful what's being said about the brand. And then finally, and this is a great one, is the brands that succeed, brands that were likely to succeed are the ones that are seen to really, really try hard to make a difference, as opposed to are kind of reacting because they feel they ought to. And it's a fine line. And some companies are bigger and they have more resources, therefore they can. But there are some very big companies who've been deafening in their silence, deafening as they stare at the precipice that's potentially could happen to their industry. So some examples, Danone has offered up, is donating 250 million euros to 15,000 small businesses in its ecosystem. And as I see it, as I read the media, the press, that's more than the top 5 global banks combined, just saying. Facebook has offered up 100 million to grant program to 30,000, of grants to a series, to 30,000 small businesses. Alibaba's the one that's really got me. They're doing 3 things. One, $2.6 billion loans to firms hit by the outbreak. 2, Jack Ma set up a learning platform for global doctors to share ideas as they all strive to fight the virus. And thirdly, and really, I don't know where this came from, but Jack Ma's got a thing about supporting Africa and doesn't want Africa to go down too heavily. So he sent 6 million masks, 1.1 million testing kits, and 60,000 protective suits to Africa. Doesn't have to. I just think that's magnificent. So this notion of companies that really, really try hard and companies are kind of going through the motions, I think that could be interesting. So from a consumer and how we're all feeling, we are responding very positively, I think, to the stuff that's got the right tone. It's not tone deaf. If they're in their swim lane, they're true to purpose. They're really going for it. And I think we'll be very judgmental as consumers to the companies who don't. So in conclusion, I'm wrapping up so you can ask your questions. The conclusions are very simply, if we're navigating the changes in consumer behavior, one, I would advocate be as structured as possible in your approach and have a strategy for each phase. Don't make it up as you go along. This isn't an unfolding, the crisis is an unfolding narrative, but you should have a structured strategy, I think. 2, never lose sight of your brand or your company purpose. Every action defines you. And it's not about changing what you stand for. You stand for what you stand for. You can refresh your relevance, by all means. 3, view the crisis as almost a necessity to embrace a challenger mindset, to innovate. Be hard on yourself. Now is the time. You know, that awful expression that was used by George Bush, I think, or someone, don't waste a good crisis. But this is the moment to seriously challenge yourself. And finally, when in doubt, ask a simple question. Does this feel right? Am I doing the right thing here? Because when it comes down to it, most of this is baked in emotion. And if it feels right, it probably is right. And just to finish with another little quote, I started with Donald Trump, I'll finish with Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. This crisis is throwing up so many surprises. You know, there was a 93% uplift in the sales of flour last month because people are baking. Didn't see that coming. There's lots of stuff, so be nimble. We've all got to stay nimble because stuff will change all the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Robert. So, guys and girls, please type your questions into the Q&A bit, and then we'll be able to answer them. But since I've got the mic, I'm going to ask my first question. So we've got quite a few people who are running retailers here on this particular call. We've got 37 of us. Oh my God, 100% turnout! Amazing. So we've got very. Is it because you? It's because the pubs are closed. This is the first time that's ever happened to me. So we've got people who are running consumer brands and retailers on this call, and I know that they're particularly struggling and worried. And I've seen some brands basically putting up messages asking for support. So, for example, I saw a recent very small retailer basically, saying something on Instagram like, we're closed, please support us, kind of buy things from our Amazon or subscribe. Almost the message is help us rather than we're great, you need our thing. What do you think of that kind of messaging?
It's all in the context, isn't it? I mean, I kind of get it, but it's a little bit the best communications doesn't say please buy me. It's implicit in the communication. The best communications inspires you to buy them. And I look at the Budweiser initiative. I forget what it's called, but it's basically you can support your local pub. You can buy a gift voucher for £20. Budweiser will double it, give the £40 to the local pub to help them ticking over. And when the pub reopens, you can go back and redeem your £20 in the first place for drinks. So you've basically given a little advance to the pub to help them going. That is a very inspiring message and makes me want to help local pubs and shops and stuff. A simple, please give me money, it's in the context, but it's less, I would say it's less effective.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't work for me. It did make me feel sorry for them, but that does not make me want to buy. It makes me want to donate, which is a different feeling. When we've got questions coming, just type them in the chat. And Oksana, let's hand over to you and your thoughts on the investing side.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Robert. It was great. I'm going to use your framework a little bit in relation to venture world, because I think that lots of funds also can adapt a similar strategy in terms of reacting, responding and rebuilding. And like some of corporates, some have more resources than others. But equally, I think, there will be a lot of pressure on the investing community in terms of supporting startups and early stage companies, because that's the only way they can kind of achieve their goals and stay funded, especially the ones that are not mature enough. So I think it's quite interesting to observe what's happening in the venture world, because many reacted in a way as some brands have reacted, and they simply revoked term sheets because they have so much pressure. Some have chosen to continue to invest and also find ways of supporting the community. And obviously there will be a new norm. They would have to look for new opportunities. Funds are brands as well, and some of them will actually lose their reputation quite quickly, because they kind of their value proposition is their reputation and the stance. So it has been very interesting to observe as well how the crisis affected the investment community as well. But I do think that there is, given how large of an ecosystem we have in UK, for example, and There is still a lot of funds with dry powder. My hope is that in the rebuilding phase, when people will actually be open to investing again, when they have sorted out the portfolio companies, that there will be a collegial mindset among good funds to continue to support new startups.